in this. I'm going to talk about the advantages of using volunteer groups. Now, the first main advantage is communication. It's mainly used for two areas, to be honest with you. It's communication. So if you say I want to communicate with a particular group of volunteers, then this is a good way to do it. Okay, you can put them in a group, and then you can easily find that group. I'll show you how to do that shortly. Another advantage is restricting opportunities to a group that I mentioned before. So you can create a group of volunteers, and then you can say only volunteers in this group, or even multiple groups. In this group, on this group, and this group, only these volunteers can get onto this opportunity. Okay? Other volunteers can see it, but you can restrict opportunity to just that group, so only those volunteers can actually get onto the opportunity. Next is advantage is you can identify the source of registration, so you can put people when they register directly into groups. Okay, so we'll speak a bit about that, and also there's some reporting functionality, some basic reporting functionality on your groups, so you can see where they come from, etc. I'm going to show you how to create a group. So I'm on a system here, and you can either follow me along or you can do this yourself. It's up to you. So if you go to volunteer management, down to volunteer groups, we can put in a volunteer group name. Dead straightforward. I don't think anyone's going to struggle with this. So I'm going to put in Stevie's Masterclass 1. Okay, so we have to create the group first of all. And we have a little link on here, which I'm going to come to in a bit later on. But we have no volunteers in it, obviously, because we just created the group. So how do you put volunteers in to the group? Well, there's a couple of ways you can do it. The main way people tend to do it is the volunteer search page. So when you go to the volunteer search page, as it loads up, okay, you can select volunteers here. These are not real volunteers, obviously, it's the training system I'm looking at. You can select your volunteers. And then down the bottom here, I've got change group. Click on there, and it says, oh, do you want to add these volunteers to a group, or do you want to remove them from a group? Well, I want to add them to a group, hence the one above the add button. To Steve's Masterclass 1, that's the one we just created. Add. There we go. As easy as that. Okay, now you've got those 3 volunteers in that group. And you'd say, well, how do I see those volunteers in that group? Okay. Well, if you go down to the filter, there's a filter down here, okay, which says group member. So if you use group member and click on the add button, say Steve's Masterclass, get rid of that filter there. So Steve's Masterclass is the only one I'm interested in. And they're those 3 volunteers. Okay.
Quick question, Steve.
Yeah, sure.
Can you have a mixture of volunteers and providers in the same group?
No, it's just volunteers or providers.
Okay.
What's interesting? What's your thinking behind that? What were you trying?
Thinking behind that was having like for the shops. So having like the group of shops so that everybody's sort of communicating with each other.
Right, I'm with you. No, it's just for the volunteers. But it's interesting though. Interesting thought. Yeah, I'll have to think about that one.
Okay,
I've been thinking about it before about provider groups, whether you can, we should link in provider to groups. It's something that's been in the back of our mind for a while. It's like a potential.
Because one of the other ones, because we've got 5, soon to be 6 shops, so you could have a provider group for the shop managers.
Yeah. I'm with you. Yeah, it's something I've definitely spoke to the development team before about doing the same for providers, because I can see uses like the example you just gave there. But
Steve, can a volunteer be a part of more than one group or just one group?
Good question. Yes, they can be as many groups as they want. Okay, so a volunteer can be in as many groups as you want them to be in. So
it would it would be good if providers could have groups as well that mirror the admin groups. I've realized I'm gonna have to, like we've set up ours, how we do it here.
Yeah.
I thought that the providers would be able to split their volunteers into they'd be able to filter like we do, like on an opportunity. So they can't easily filter which volunteers are in which shop, for example. I'd have to go in and set all their groups up for them, whereas I've already got them broken down by opportunity. So I'm going to have to go in and do a load of group work on their logins.
Yeah, they do. Providers do have groups, like they have what you have in terms, but they have their own groups. Because what you'll find is sometimes admins, they'll have groups which they won't want. Quite often they don't want the providers aware of their groups.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes they have groups. I've seen them before, systems groups, and you know, it's like these people here are. I don't know. There's groups and group names that they don't want to make them aware. Don't want to make provider, if you know what I mean, if you read between the lines. They don't want to make providers aware of. So admins have their own groups and an admin can create a group, and all of their admins can see that group. So admins have their own set of groups that they can share between admins. For obvious reasons, that's usually what happens.
Yeah.
But then providers, when a provider creates a group, it's just for them.
Yeah.
So the provider it's just their group that only they can use.
Yeah.
They can't see, like you say, they can't see the admin groups for the reasons that I just mentioned before.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can understand your particular scenario though, why that would be useful there.
Yeah.
So we create a group, we put volunteers into the group, and I can find those volunteers by going into group member here, selecting Steve's Mastermind group, click on the search button, they come up. And then I can do certain things with them, like I could select them here and I could send them an email, for example, or an SMS text, or I could, you know, there's loads of other things down here, book a meeting with them, whatever I think is useful. Okay. Another way you can add volunteers into a group, there's a few different pages you can do it on, but the other main way is opportunities. So if you ever go into an opportunity and there's volunteers on an opportunity, you find some of the volunteers on. There's one. So if you go into an opportunity and go to volunteers in here, you can also group them in here. So if I select the volunteer in this opportunity, it could be multiple volunteers. It could be everyone on the opportunity if I want it to be. And again, I've got the change group and I can add them into that group there. Okay, now there's 4 volunteers in that group. So there's a few different ways you can add volunteers into groups. Like I say, finding volunteers in a group, we've got the volunteer search filters that I've just spoke about there. And then we've got the communications. So you can send volunteers comms, as you just see me do it here, from the volunteer search page, where I found them in the group and I selected them, I sent them an email. You can also send them communications via the bulk email page. That also has the group function on there. So if I go to the bulk email page and I want to send a particular communication out, down here we have restricted volunteer groups, and there's my group. It even tells me how many volunteers are in that group. Okay, so yeah, so there's a few different ways you can actually use groups in regards to communications. Any questions over that, communicating with volunteers in a group?
Just one, Steve. Are we going to get this recording?
Yes. So all recordings, all recordings, said it's help and support volunteer manager resources, and you'll see them. Here's all previous masterclasses.
Wonderful. Thank you. I had no idea. Thanks.
Okay, no worries. You'll see them appearing on there. Yeah.
I have a question regarding the group. Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
I wanted to know that, is there any way for the volunteers to interact with each other? Because all of this, all of the communication that you've explained so far is a bit like broadcasting out to volunteers. But are there any chat functions where volunteers can interact with each other?
Yes, there is. It's not to do with groups, but there's only one way in the system that a volunteer can communicate with another volunteer, and it's on the opportunity chats. So when you need to make sure it's switched on within your options, and there's an option there against opportunities, and turn on opportunity chat, or chat room, I think it's called. Which basically means that when volunteers are on an opportunity, when they go to the opportunity, they've got a chat button they can press there, and it's like a forum basically for that specific opportunity, which means that any volunteer on that opportunity can communicate with everybody else on that opportunity. And it usually asks questions like, anyone taking waterproof clothing tomorrow, or how is the parking available? They ask questions like that, and then other volunteers can respond to those questions. Now, everyone, the only people who can see those communications are people who are on that opportunity, okay? And the person who's running the provider, the person who's running the opportunity. And I should say admins, just assume admins can do everything because they can always do everything on the system. But in regards to the non-admin users, it's just the provider of that opportunity, and the volunteers on that opportunity can see the chat. They actually get an email when people send chat messages on one of their opportunities, which they can opt in or out of receiving those emails if they want. But that's the only place where they can chat to each other. And I've seen it, the main purposes are like you say, they're asking questions, which other volunteers can answer about what clothing to wear or parking or things like that. Sometimes I've seen it used where they want to make somebody else on the opportunity aware that they're on that particular opportunity. So if you think about it, volunteers, they can't see a list of all the other volunteers on that opportunity. So sometimes they'll use it as like, I'm going to this one, and it will come up and say the name of the person because they've sent a chat message out there. So that way other people know, right, okay, yeah, I'll go along with that one with you because I'm your mate or whatever. So that's the two common reasons I see that chat function used. Does that help?
Yes, that was very helpful. I just have a quick follow-up based on what you said, because volunteers cannot see other volunteers on the opportunities. But if we add a certain set of volunteers to a group, would they be able to see who else is in the group?
No, they're not even aware if you put them into an admin group, they're not even aware, because sometimes you wouldn't even want them to be aware. You might have, I don't know, a group of awkward customers. You might have something like that, so there's certain, you don't want them, they don't always want them to be aware, the volunteers to be aware that they're in that particular group. So no, they can't see which admin groups they're in, for sure.
Okay, thank you so much.
It's okay, no problem. Restricting opportunities to a group. So what are we going to do? Restricting opportunities to a group. All right, so communicating with volunteers in a group. So I've just talked about you do it via the volunteer search page, where I said you went down here and you went to group member, and then you selected them. Click on search button. Then I showed you can select all, and then you can email them, text them, book a meeting with them, yada yada yada. Email and text communications. And I showed you could also do that within the bulk emails page. Yeah. When you're sending out a bulk email, which I'm sure all of you do. Restricting opportunities to a group. So this is one of the main purposes behind groups. You want to restrict opportunities to a group. So when you create an opportunity, put in letter picking, description, you'll get to a page on here. We'll say, give you the ability to, now I must say, if you're going to get to the bit, if you want to restrict an opportunity to a group, you need to create a fully managed opportunity. So that's the only kind of prerequisite for that. And then when we get to the opportunity restrictions, so do you want to allow everyone access to this opportunity? Well, if I wanted to restrict it to a group, then my answer to this question would be no. Then it brings up different restrictions, age restrictions. And one of the restrictions down here is restrict to admin volunteer group. And there's my group there. It even tells me how many people are in it again. So I can select that, and I can carry on creating the opportunity. Next, next, next. I'm skipping past all these. Flexible, create the opportunity. So now only those 4 volunteers will be able to get onto that opportunity. Okay, once I've authorized it. Okay. Now, other volunteers will be able to see the opportunity. If we go to the search page, you'll still be able to see the opportunity, but only the volunteer who's in that group will be able to get onto it. So everybody else, the information will come up, but at the top in big red letters, it says, sorry, this opportunity is restricted to a group that you are not part of. So I can probably show you that. So if I go to a volunteer who's not in that group, here's one here, impersonate them. So this volunteer is not in that group. When they go to the search page, we're looking for that opportunity I just created, which was called litter litter picking one or something like that, I think called it. Litter picking one there. Sorry, this opportunity is restricted to certain volunteers, to a certain volunteer groups that you are not a member of. So that's what the volunteers see if they're not in the group. If they are in the group, it just lets them get into the opportunity.
And can that restriction only apply at group level, or could it be applied to a session within the group level?
Could it be applied at group level?
Sorry, could it be applied within the opportunity to a particular session?
No, the opportunities are restricted because once you're on an opportunity,
yeah,
then you
no, makes sense. I've reckoned that, but I just wanted to check.
Yeah, because once you're on an opportunity, then you can join any session. The application is to get onto the opportunity, not onto a specific session.
Yeah.
So the restriction of group is to do with the application of getting onto the opportunity, not to do with any. Once they're on it, doesn't matter how they get on it, then they've got access to all the sessions once they're on it.
Yeah.
So this is about restricting them from actually getting on it in the first place, if that makes sense.
No, it's okay.
Restrict opportunities to a group. Yeah, so you can restrict opportunities to a group. What I should say, kind of common kind of misconceptions is sometimes people say, "Oh, I want to create a group because I want to know everybody who's from Manchester, where I am at the moment." Okay. That's not a good reason, a good use of the group function, because the people who are from Manchester, it's a dynamic group. It's an ever-changing group, because every time volunteers register, the next volunteer that registers might be from Manchester, and they're not going to be in that group, because the group doesn't stipulate an area. It doesn't say, it's not stipulating a geographical area. A group's just, it's going to hold just the volunteers that you assign to that group. So that wouldn't be the correct use. In regards to, if you did it, you're constantly having to keep updating it. So I wouldn't say use groups for things like that. If you wanted to do like a group of volunteers based on geography, then what you would do, rather than creating a static group, which is what we're talking about here, a static group that you are defining and manually putting people in and out of, then you would create something more dynamic using the queries here. So you'd say, I want to know all volunteers where the city they're from is, but Manchester's not even in here, is it? No, it's not. It's all made up data. But imagine Manchester's down here, click Dundee. So it's going to show you all volunteers from that particular city, because then that way, this is always going to be updated. If someone registers later on this afternoon and they put in a postcode that's from an address that's from Dundee, they will automatically be added to this group. So that's an example of where you'd say, rather than using groups, you'd use a query. And you'd probably say, maybe it's something, I always need to know this. Every month I need to do a report where I need to know which volunteers are from Dundee. Well, in that case, then you'd run the filter here and you'd save it, and you'd call it monthly Dundee volunteers, whatever you want to call it, and save it, which means that in future, all you got to do is go down to monthly, where is it down here? Monthly Dundee volunteers, and it's always going to bring up that group, whoever's in, whichever people are within that geographical region. So that's like a dynamic group, like I say. So it's not just manually waiting for you to put people into it. It looks at all the volunteers, even though if they just registered 2 minutes ago, and says, okay, then I'm going to see which ones meet this particular criteria that I've set out using the filters. Does that make sense? Has anyone got any questions over that? That's a common kind of misconception. Let's see. Good. Okay. Yeah. You can actually, another good use of groups is to identify the source of registrations. Okay. What do I mean by that, Steve? What do you mean by that? What I mean is, if you went into a college, or say a school, okay, and you're dealing with a load of 16-year-olds, and you go into a class and you talk about volunteering, and then you want to get them to register, but you want to keep them separate. Okay? You want to know, okay, which out of all my volunteers on my system, which one have come from that particular class? What you can do is, if you go down to volunteer management, down to your volunteer groups, yeah, this is when this link comes into it. This link next to it is actually a registration link. So if you, I need to log out of here to show you this. this is a registration link. So if I click on there, it's going to take me. So I can share that link with everybody in that classroom, for example. Yeah, all the kids in the classroom. And then when they click on the link, you just saw me click on the link there. It comes up with the registration. They register. Second. Trying to find me. Steve Masterclass 1. They put in their email address. On the register button. It sends an email through. They go to the email inbox. Imagine this is like Hotmail or Gmail or your Outlook or whatever you use. I've just got a fancy way I can kind of create email accounts on the fly. Oh, he says. He said, I got a fancy way. Watch this work. Oh, they're not working, all of them. All right, maybe I can't show you that then. Right, we'll abandon that idea. But you can, when they click on this link, it's going to take them to basically to the registration page where they will register. Now, once the volunteer's registered, okay, it will automatically put them into that group. So imagine you've gone to the class, spoke to the kids. Great, here's about volunteering. If you want to get involved, take down the web address, or whatever you want to do, probably make it to a QR code or something if you're going to do that. And then for this web address here, and when the volunteers go to that web address, they register. They don't see anything different than a normal registration. But in the background, because it's using this link in the background, the system has a clever way of actually saying, hang on a minute, I know this person registered, but they belong in this group. So we're going to automatically inject them into that group called Steve's Masterclass 1. So you can capture them all together. It's also good for like, I mean, if you're doing a big promotional drive, you know, you might say, which I suppose is similar-ish to the kind of the classroom scenario, but imagine if you're putting out an email asking a particular group of volunteers at a university or something to register. Again, you can use that link for something like that. Or maybe you put it on a poster or something like that. You can use this link, put it into a QR code, which means suddenly you know exactly which volunteers have responded from that particular promotional drive, because when they've registered, they've ended up in that group, and the group might be called My Promotional Drive, 2025 or something like that. Yep. So you can. Yep. You got a question there? Question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Oh, fantastic. So thank you. That's really helpful for me, because an issue we're having at the moment is like still kind of transitioning from our previous system to TeamKinetic with some of our volunteering opportunities. So it's getting like existing volunteers to register in, which is taking quite some time. So you could use this technique then to kind of have people register, and you've already created an opportunity that's restricted to that group. And that way, when they come in, they can immediately then go and get onto that group, and only they can do that. So we can kind of filter through our existing volunteers that way, while still having the opportunity as like up on the website as this is something we do, but preventing others from registering for it, right?
Yeah.
Because like a lot of our opportunities we have a lot of opportunities, but very few that are actively recruiting for, because they're like maxed out with numbers.
But you still want to make the volunteers workforce aware that the opportunity is there,
yeah,
but without letting them get onto it. Okay.
Yeah. So this is a good way to do that, then, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. This would be
the
way to do that. Yeah. And that's a good it's an interesting scenario. Yeah. So yeah, for those of you who didn't capture that, so it's saying if you've got they've got a particular opportunity, they do want to share it or make their volunteer workforce aware of it, but they only want a particular set of volunteers who are already on the opportunity from their old system, but they're moving over to a new one. But they only want to let a specific set of volunteers be able to get onto that opportunity. Probably the volunteers who are already on it on their old system until they move to TeamKinetic, I'm guessing. And yes, that's the way to do it. I mean, normally, if you said, I don't want volunteers to be aware of it. If that was a scenario, you say, well, I just want these volunteers to be able to get onto it, but I don't care about everyone else being aware of it. then you wouldn't have to use volunteer groups. In that scenario, you would hide.
Yeah, that's what we've been doing.
You can hide the opportunity. But then again, when you hide the opportunity, then it means the other volunteers don't even know it exists.
Yeah.
Not what you're trying to achieve. So
that's our problem. So it sounds like this is the perfect solution to that, to be able to show it, but only allow the volunteers who are already doing that volunteer role to get onto the system. So that's perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem at all. Okay. Any other questions regarding that? No? Okay. We've also, in regards to the reporting, you go down to maps, you can also see volunteers by group here. There you go, Steve's Masterclass. And they're the volunteers. I can zoom in. I bet they're on the same address, but this one here is not. Now you click on the volunteer, Dylan Marks, which is one of the volunteers who is in that group. And I could click on them. And it will take me right the way through to the page, the volunteers profile page. And if I go down to groups and linking, you will see Steve's Masterclass 1, already in that group. So what we're looking at now is another way you can add volunteers into a group. We know we can do it from the volunteer search page. We know we can go into an opportunity. You know, you saw me go to the opportunity and select the volunteers and put them into a group there. You can also just go in directly into a volunteer and just add them to a masterclass. So if I had the way I would do it, if a volunteer, I was chatting to a volunteer and I realized, okay, this person needs to be in this particular group, I need to separate them from everyone else. Say like Baker McIntosh, then you'd probably just go in here, type in the name, Baker McIntosh, go down to groups and linking, they're already in there. And at any stage, I can just click on it. Now they're not in the group, click on it again, now they are in the group. It's as easy as that. So that's under, well, that last bit is just going to the volunteers profile page, but the maps bit is reporting and maps, which allows you to search for them geographically.
If you create a group on an opportunity or restrict them to that opportunity, if additional people come in on that opportunity, do they get included into that group?
No.
No.
So the group is separate from the opportunity. I mean, you can. So when you create the opportunity, you know you can put in the restrictions. You saw me do it before, restricted to that particular group, which means only those volunteers can get into it. But as you rightfully pointed out, well, you can override that. The volunteers can't override that. They have to be in that group to get into that opportunity. If the volunteer is trying to get onto that opportunity, the volunteer has no way of overriding it. It's restricted to that group. So unless they're in that group, they're not going to get onto it. But you as an admin, or the providers as well, at any stage, you can go in there and manually add volunteers onto the opportunity. So if I went down to that litter picking one, and I went down to sessions, clicked on the add button here, I could type in, there you go, Dylan Marks, click on them. Now that volunteer has been added to this opportunity. And it let me do that even if the volunteer wasn't in, if this was restricted to a group and the volunteer wasn't in that group, it'll let me add, you know, as an admin, I can add any volunteer onto any opportunity and override all the restrictions.
Okay, so when we create an opportunity, we would be better off waiting to create the group on that opportunity until such time as we're ready to do comms, because we have additional people coming into each opportunity continuously.
So say that again, sorry.
So we put up opportunities and there's people continuously adding. But if we create that opportunity as a group, it only takes in the people that were in the group at the time we created the group.
Yeah, I mean, it'll only accept people who are in the group. The last bit, at the time you create the group, I mean, that's not strictly true. You could add, you know, if I restrict it to 5 volunteers and then I create the opportunity and restrict it to that group, then only those 5 volunteers can get onto it. But if I add another 3 volunteers to that group, then now there's 8 volunteers who can get onto the opportunity. It doesn't care about what the original group was. You've now got more people in that group, and it will let any of those people in that group, that larger group, get onto that opportunity.
Oh, perfect. So once we create the group as being that opportunity, as people select that opportunity, they get added into that group.
Oh, no. So you create, what I'm saying is, if you create a group.
Yeah.
Do it now. So I create a group here. Okay. Restricted opportunity group. Okay. I put some volunteers into it. Okay. So I'm going to put Baker McIntosh into that group. So now only Baker McIntosh, if I went to create an opportunity now, which was restricted to that group, nonsense then. Get to the bit where it says, do you want to allow a volunteer onto the opportunity? Nope. And I can create restricted opportunity group. Next. Let me get to the next, and I create the opportunity. Okay, so now at the moment, I've created an opportunity once I authorize it. So now I've got an opportunity called Group Op2, and only that one volunteer can get onto it because that's the only volunteer in that group. Unless I override it like I just showed you a minute ago and just manually put people onto it. But in terms from the volunteer's perspective, only that volunteer can get into that opportunity. Now, if I add volunteers to the group, if I go down to let's put in Dylan. Groups and Lincoln. Okay. And I put that volunteer, Dylan Marks, into that group called Restricted Op Group. Okay. So I'm just doing it then. So now both of those volunteers will be able to get onto that opportunity because both volunteers are in that group. So both volunteers can get onto that opportunity. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Any other questions? You're kind of firing through this session.
Is there a limit to how many groups we can create at a time?
Nope. Create as many as you want. And as you saw with these groups, they've got the same volunteer in 2 groups. The volunteer can be in as many groups as you want. You can have as many groups as you want as well, and there can be as many volunteers as you want in each of those groups.
Thank you.
No problem. Is that another question?
Yeah, Stephen, I'm just wondering, it's a slightly different question, but volunteers have inquired about the possibility of logging their availability on a calendar. Could a group be created for that so volunteers go and add their availability within an opportunity with the calendar?
So when you say, so the bit I'm not sure about is when you say they say in their availability. So
yeah.
There's nothing on an opportunity where they can say their availability. They either join an opportunity and they join sessions or they don't. There's nothing. If you want to capture availability, that'd be something you'd have to do probably during registration. I mean, can you?
Yes.
Yeah,
we already do that. The volunteers have specifically inquired about the possibility of having a calendar where they themselves go and let us know their availability.
I'm with you. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you said, okay, let's delve into that one then. So you're saying we've got some volunteer registers on the system, and one of the questions on the system is what's your availability? Okay, so let's just play this one. We've got a bit of time here. We're flying through these. Flying through this course here, so we can take a bit of time to focus on the particular areas. It's no problem. So if I go down to say custom questions, and I add a question on here, and it's called availability. Okay. Now, usually I'm kind of adverse to availability. The reason of volunteers saying their availability, because the reason being is, well, the search pages kind of deal with that. There's lots of ways they can see when an opportunity is on. They've got volunteers who've got a calendar view, at the very least, where they can, when they're searching for opportunities, they can see it by day, what opportunities are taking place on each day. See this calendar view up here. So usually I would say, well, just let the volunteers find the opportunity. They know their own availability, so let them find the opportunity, based around their own availability, which they already know. rather than the issue I have with capturing availability at the point of registration is that can change. You know, it can 12 months down the line, their availability might have
So
changed.
that's exactly my question. So volunteers are already associated with an opportunity. It's a group of volunteers that are already attending. What they want to have the opportunity to do is to go to a calendar every week and let us know their availability every week, whether they're coming in or not. And they rather not email us and let us know they would like to have the opportunity to just put it on a calendar that everyone can see.
Oh, that's a complex. They want to put their availability on a calendar that everyone can see.
Yeah, so we can all see who's available, basically. Yeah.
Right. So you can all see who's available.
Mm-hmm.
I would, and it's a more complex one. I'm trying to think how you would do that.
Okay, but we don't do it yet. Okay.
Yeah, you don't do it yet. Yeah, you would have to, when you create these, because we're kind of going a bit off track here, but it's okay. That's fine. So when you're creating, you could say, okay, I'm going to capture it at the point of registration. Okay, what their availability is. But availability registration. Okay, and then they put in. This short name is if you export it to Excel. That's what this is talking about. Availability registration. Then you can say, okay, then it's going to be, how do they select it? Well, it would be if they're choosing their availability, you probably have let's just keep it really simple. You say all you want to know is what days they're available, Monday through to Sunday. Okay. So we'd say, well, that's a selection list because they need to be able to select multiple. They might not just be available just for Monday. If it was just one day you wanted them to choose, then you choose a drop-down menu. They're selecting one of a bunch of options. What you're talking about here is you want them to select potentially multiple options. I can make Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So that's going to be a selection list. So you put your selection list on there and you'd say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Okay. Why does it make a difference? Okay. So when the volunteer registers, it's going to ask them that question about their availability.
Yeah, that's not what we want to know. Yeah, it's okay. I've already realized there's something we can't do.
The only way, the reason why I was kind of mentioning this here is potentially you could do it if you added a question in, because that way it's at the point of registration, but you want them to update it as they're going along, like on a week by week basis of what they're available.
Yeah, they asked us. We're fine with the way it is now, but that's what they're asking us. Yes, if they can do that. You could
do it and see that information. There is a way you could do it. So if you add it rather than a volunteer registration question, if you add it as a volunteer profile question, which means it's not going to ask them what their availability is at the point of registration, but it's available to them in their profile page where they can update it whenever they want.
Okay.
So you could do, so if I do this here and say this week's availability. Okay. And then I'll say, again, it's going to be a selection list. And we're going to do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Okay. And then we can add that in there. Editable by volunteers, yes. Viewable by volunteers, yes. Add it in there. Now, if I go and impersonate a volunteer now, as you know, that means it's going to log me in as a volunteer.
Yeah.
Dylan Marks. I haven't get Dylan Marks. I'll go Galvin. Access to the system. Okay. So impersonate a volunteer. So I'm looking now as if I'm logged in as a volunteer. This is exactly what the volunteer would see. Now, if I go down to on my profile, if I scroll down here, you're going to see availability, this week's availability. And they can select that and change that whenever they want. This is what this week's availability is. And you'd say, okay, then I'm going to choose Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Save. Oh, wait there. It wants me to select a couple of these. These are mandatory ones that have been created before. Ignore these. Okay. So I would choose Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. I think I chose. Yeah. Just so you see, Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. You say okay then, and then if the admin wants to know what that which people are available on that Monday, then the admin can go to filters. They can go down the bottom of the list. This week's availability. Get rid of that one there. This week's availability. Add. And I'd say I want to know everyone who's available on Monday. Galvin's on there because Galvin, you saw me say Galvin said that is available this week on a Monday. Or I could say who's available on the Sunday. Should be nobody. Because no one selected Sunday.
Yeah. So
now
we could create a group for that. We could create a group for a particular cohort of volunteers, let's say, and then we will get all their availability in that way.
Yeah, I don't think you need to create a group for that, to be honest with you. I think you need to do what I said. So first of all, add it in a custom question.
Okay.
And you need to add the question as a volunteer profile question. So it's not asking them during the registration process. It's asking them, it's asking them after the registration process. They can update that information, as you just saw me do. You saw me go in there and log in, impersonate the volunteer, and say what days I was available. You just saw me do this before from here, down here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you can, so you do that first of all. So the volunteers have a way of saying what days are available. And then the next thing is, okay, you want to know which volunteers are available on those particular days. So that's when we just go back to the volunteer search page and we just look at the field that we just created, this week's availability.
Yeah.
Get rid of that one.
Thanks.
And you could do it. You could do it multiple. You might say, I want to know which people are available on weekdays. For example, maybe it's for a charity shop or something like that. And you say, well, it's only open Monday to Fridays. You say, well, which people are available Monday to Friday? You could add this in here: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Okay. Wonderful.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Okay, so I've got all the volunteers in there. I could save this now and say volunteers available this during weekdays this week. Thank you, Chris. Fresh cup of tea, thank you. And volunteers available during weekdays this week. Save. So now at any point in future, when you're on the system, let's go away from the page, and you say, I want to know which volunteers are available during any weekdays. I've got an opportunity up and coming. So you can go into there, go to your volunteers, click on your filters down here, volunteers available during weekdays. Just selected it. I don't know if you can see this. Doesn't always share everything. This week's availability. No, it's come up like that. I've set it up wrong. You get the idea. I've chosen the wrong
Thank
option.
you. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for taking the time. Yeah.
That way you're going to see them all the volunteers that are available on those particular days. And if you wanted to, the reason why I wouldn't use groups is because what goes back to the point I was making before, really, is what you're talking about is a dynamic group. Okay, it changes. So you're talking about you're trying to have a group of volunteers. You want to know which ones are available on weekdays this week. Well, it changes that group, and it changes depending on. It's not just down to you putting them into it. It changes or depends on what the volunteers have said, what they've just updated in their profile page and said, I'm available this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, for example. So the group is ever changing depending on what the volunteers are selecting. So for that example, you creating a group is not going to be any good because you can't. The group is static. Once you've created a group, the group is static. It doesn't change. It won't look. The following week, that group will be the same, regardless of what those people change in regards to what days are available. The group will remain the same. It won't update itself because the group is just the volunteer group that you've defined. So for that example, that's why I said you'd use the queries instead. So you go onto here, use these filters instead. You go onto here and you'd select it that way. Because that way you know you're getting, as of this point in time, this very second, these are the volunteers that have said they're available this week. Does that make sense? We're getting into some real nitty gritty stuff here, aren't we? Some real detail.
Thank you.
Stuff.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions? We're going to the final point. Nope. Okay. The final point is just to really to let you know that providers can also do the same thing. So if I look at the providers on this system. Okay. and I impersonate a provider. So now my admin hat's off, provider hat on. I'm cooking on gas. So providers, again, they have groups, and they can add a group. Looks slightly different, the layout, but it's the same, works exactly the same way. Can't spell. Provider group 2. And they have not all the same functionality that you have. They don't have, they do have maps on there, I suppose. But they can go to like volunteer search page. They can group members down here. So they can group members down here. So they can do all this stuff, find out which volunteers are in provider group 2, search, and then it bring up the volunteers who are in that group. I haven't put any on it in that group yet. You saw me. But they would appear here if I did that. So providers, and they can also restrict opportunities to their groups as well. So when providers are creating opportunities, and they get down to the restrictions bit. Do you want to allow everyone to access this opportunity? No. It shows the provider groups. You see, they're not showing now. They're not seeing the admin groups that you've created. They only see their own groups, providers. Now, if you're interested for any particular reason, I can't imagine why, but if you're ever interested in knowing which volunteers are in a provider group, the only way to do it is to impersonate the provider, like I've just done, and go to your volunteer groups or just search from the volunteer search page. That's the only way to see it. You can't see it from the admin screens. You have to impersonate the provider to see that. Yeah. Is there anything else? No, that's it. Oh, check the chat. So is there any questions?
Yeah, I've got one question. You might have covered it already, but I've been getting interrupted. I've also been presenting. Can you restrict an opportunity to 2 or more groups?
Yes. So when you create the opportunity, I put in provider opportunity 3. If everyone could see this, I'm going to make it a bit larger. This might mess up the screen a little bit, but so you can see it. Okay, I'll go down here. Pick a location. And we get through to the bit. Do you want to allow everyone to access the opportunity? No. And then I can select multiple groups.
Right, okay.
So it would pick up any volunteers in either of those groups. There isn't any at the moment, but if there was, it would allow any volunteer in either of those groups to get onto this opportunity I'm creating.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no problem. Any other questions? I heard them the ping there.
Oh, so next stage, I'm just thinking this through in my head here.
Yeah.
The opportunity, because what I'm thinking is we've got 5 shops, and as you've been talking there, I'm thinking like having 2 types of groups, having a group for each of the shops, so there'll be 5 groups, then another group which will be a mixture of volunteers from each of those shops. They say they're happy to work in one of the other ones if they're short.
What's the purpose of the group though? Why do you need to put them in a group? Why aren't they just on an opportunity at the shop?
No, because this will be an opportunity to go to. So the purpose for this would be that they could, if say Stephen phones up, say he's got a puncture and he can't make it into Cowbridge, which is one of our shops. I've got this group of volunteers who are shop volunteers in the other shops, not all the volunteers in the shops, but this group have said, I'm happy to go to another shop if you're short. So we can get a message out to that group quickly saying, can you cover Stephen's absence?
Yeah. Yeah, you could use it for that if you wanted to. I would probably say, how would I do that? I don't know if I'd use a group for that, because a group is, like I say, it's a static list of volunteers.
Yeah.
Okay, which means that once you've defined that group and you say, oh, these 10 volunteers have said that they're available to work in other shops, then it's only that 10 volunteers. The only way that list of 10 volunteers is going to change is if you go and change it, is if you go in and say, all right, I want to add this volunteer to it. Now it's 11 volunteers. You have to manually change it. Now, the reason why I say that is because you might be better adding that as a registration question, which means that that way the volunteers are saying they're free to work in other shops, and it's dynamic. That list changes itself without you doing anything. The volunteers are opting in or out of it. They have the ability to change their mind.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So I'd probably add it as either a registration, custom registration question.
Yeah.
Some questions down here. Either a custom registration question. Let's add question over here. Either a volunteer registration question or volunteer profile question. And the only difference between why you would choose one of these and not the other is, well, do you want to ask every volunteer this question at the point of registration? Or maybe you just want it available to them, so they don't see it as a registration question. But if the volunteer goes into their profile page, they can select it. Like I showed you before with the availability Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the same thing. They can go into their profile page and select which ones they're available for, and they can change their mind. So you might create that as a volunteer profile question. Say, I am willing to work in other shops. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you'd say that'd be a yes or no question.
Or it could be a drop down indicating which shops are willing to be in.
Yep. It could be a selection list. Yeah. And you could have a list of, let's say, shop A, shop B, shop C.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you say viewable by volunteers, yes. Editable by volunteers, yes. I want them to be able to edit it, to change it, because they might change their mind.
Yeah.
Viewable providers, yes. Put that in there. Add. Okay. So now from a volunteers perspective, now we go into the volunteers page. Yep, I'm on as a volunteer now. If I refresh this page. So I'm logged in as a volunteer. I click on my profile. I go down here to the bit that says I'm willing to work in other shops, and say yes, I'm near shops A and shop C, and I'm going to save that. Which means now, now if you want to find out which volunteers, if you're short, if you're in shop A and you're short of people, then you can say, right, they let you know and say I'm short of people, and you say, okay, I'll find some volunteers that said they're willing to work in your shop. Then you go down here and you go to your filters in here, and you go right down the bottom of the list till you see I'm willing to work in the one we just created. And then I say, shop A, is it? And I click on search button, and it shows me every volunteer then, which has said they're willing to work at shop A.
And then you could dig a message out to them quickly then.
Yeah, just select them there, and then send an email, fire a message out to them. Then, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, that's
you give me some real testers people today, haven't you? You really tested my knowledge of the system here, which is good. I like it. Rachel, you got a question for me?
Yeah, just touching back on what I mentioned earlier about how I've discovered, I did message with Rolf about this, but discovered how providers can't see where their volunteers are volunteering. So they get their list of volunteers, and they needed a list of everyone in one particular shop. And I didn't realise they didn't have the option, because they're the hospice opportunities, not the provider opportunities, because of how we manage it. So I thought they would have that drop down filter of on opportunity, and she would get her list. So I'm like, right, okay, how do I work around this? So I was going to go in and create groups logged in as provider of retail, but just list it, because I'm using groups for all sorts, like the stage their applications at, if they're hospice based, if they're retail, etc. But it made me think that maybe would it be better if I added a question in the filter custom fields in the profile, and I could put in the shop that they're volunteering at, because then retail, that would appear as an option to filter under the provider, wouldn't it?
Yes.
So
if you made that available, that field available to the provider, which you can make it visible to the provider, then yes, they would be able to see that, and they'll be able to.
And she would just have to say I could go down each volunteer profile in turn, just add in where they're volunteering and maybe when. They could go in and do that filter, and she'd download her results, and then she'd have the information she needed. The other thing with downloading results, just from the normal volunteers as an, admin login, is there any way that when it downloads, you get like everything, all that information? I suppose once I've added that field, it would be on there, but it's a shame that at the moment, as it is now, it doesn't show you the opportunity that they're on.
When you download it, when you download information.
Yeah.
If you, from your perspective, you can go to report and download data, and there's one there for opportunity report, which will let you. So if you go down here and you go to,
I can't
download.
see. I think you should.
Oh, sorry, I stopped sharing, didn't I?
Yeah.
I did this yesterday, didn't I, Brian? I chatted to Brian yesterday, did it twice, I think. It's there we go. So sharing that. So if you go to reporting, go to download data.
Yeah.
Then you can either go download opportunity data. So that's going to download a list of of every opportunity and all volunteers on each of those opportunities. So you just get all the volunteer info. I'll show you. Tell you what, I'll show you.
Okay. But it doesn't tell you who's on that opportunity.
Yeah, it does, yeah. So you've got
I chose the wrong thing. Maybe I chose the wrong option. Let's close that.
Yeah, there's a few different downloads on there, but this one will show you
download opportunity data. Was that the one you chose?
I've clicked on the wrong one. No, you're right. I clicked on the wrong one. That's why. It's download volunteer opportunity data. It's this one here.
Download volunteer. Right. Okay.
Yeah. Opportunities. Is that the right one? Is that the new one? It's still downloading. I think it's still downloading.
Yeah, mine is as well.
Yeah, but that will show you that option there will show you a list of all the volunteers, and it will say like Joe Blogs, and then it'll list all the opportunities next to them. So it will say Joe Blogs, Joe Blogs, Joe Blogs if they're on 3 opportunities. So you can see a list of all the volunteers and what opportunities they're on. Alternatively, you could just go to the opportunity and you can just export the list there of all the volunteers. So if you go to any opportunity, so if I go to an opportunity which has got volunteers on it.
Yeah, there's 12 opportunities per shop though, so because they're broken down by the shift. So if it was just if everyone in one shop was all on one opportunity, that would be fairly easy, but it's not. It's 12 opportunities per shop.
I'm with you. I mean, I suppose you can, each of your shops, are they set up as a provider? Is that like every shop's a provider?
No. Retail as a department is a provider.
Right, okay, but the shops are not broken down by provider.
No.
Okay. So the only difference is really the location, isn't it? It's the location. So yeah, I mean, you do it you'd have to do it as groups, is the only way I could think of that working, which is the way you're doing it by the sound of it.
But then if I add that custom field in under the profile and make it visible to the provider.
Oh, sorry, yeah, that would work. Yeah, that for sure that would work better.
I've been using, like I said, I've been using groups, but I love joining these things because someone else says something and it makes me think, oh, can I use that for something? Or you'll start telling them about something, and it, like, I wouldn't have thought of that if I hadn't been sat here now. I'd have been creating groups under retail and then adding the relevant volunteers into it. So
yeah, absolutely, yeah. But no, you're right what you said. For something like that, if it's something that's updated, it's dynamic, it's changing, and you want them the ability, allow the volunteers the ability to add themselves to it or remove themselves from it. Then you want to put it in as a custom question, like you say. Put it in as a custom field, and then you put it in as a profile question, like we went through before.
Yeah.
And you'd let them say their availability or whatever.
Well, that would be me. Once they've started, I would add what shop they're at.
Yeah.
Once they've started. So yeah, right. I think I'll sit and do that this afternoon. So I can't join the next session you've got about the new updates and things, but I'm guessing will that be recorded and available? Yeah,
I'll be in the same place. That's all within help and support down here, down to volunteer manager resources. It'll be in there with the other masterclasses.
When does the new one roll out? The update?
We're the final stage of testing now. So the way it works is We finish up all of our testing, then we allow users, you'll get a message allowing you to admins to log in to the beta system, which is basically the next version of the system. And then you'll be able to have a play around with it. We have a 1 week for you to have a play around with it and let us know any issues. Then there's usually a week afterwards where we pick up any issues that people have found and we resolve those, and then we roll it out. At the point of rolling it out, there'll be a masterclass, which is what it's talking about. So it'll be virtually around that date, basically, when the masterclass is. So there'll be a masterclass where we'll talk about it'll be me going through all the functions on it, the main functionality and how it can be used. And then that'll be recorded and available to you. And there's also a blog. So whenever you're not sure, if you ever go to the TeamKinetic website and click on blog, it's probably got a blog in there already, I'm guessing, for this next update, talking about the different things. There's some great stuff coming in the next update. Full bloom ahead. So growing together, guest masterclasses. Oh, they haven't added it yet, but you'll see a blog on here, and it'll talk about all the different functions, basically. There's also what we're going to be doing is after the week after we roll out the next update, which is 2.6, TeamKinetic 2.6. We're going to be doing every day, sending out like a short blog with a video of it talking about a particular function on it. Here's a particular update, and kind of going into more, like I'm doing now, really, but talking about just the new functions individually. So on the run up to the update, you're gonna have a week to have a play around with it on yourself before we actually roll it out. When we roll it out, there's gonna be a masterclass that I'm gonna be running, and I'm gonna do something like I've just done today, talking about all the new functionality. Then we're gonna drip feed those individual videos talking about individual functions every day after that for you to have a play around with, and it's also available on the blog.
Look forward to it.
Yeah, it should be good. There's some really interesting stuff you're going to have in the next update. I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but we've got like AI in there, and we've got the ability when you're creating opportunities, you can I can show you. So when you're creating opportunities, this is one bit I love anyway. Now we've got a dual language system here. Most of you don't have dual language. Some of our customers have dual language. So don't worry about this dual language bit. You won't see that. But what we do have is the ability to, when you're putting in a name, if you need some help, you put in the name of it, say it's litter picking. And you say, all right, I need to do a description. Oh, I'm no good at doing descriptions. It takes me ages. I'm not very creative. We just put something in, click on get some AI help, and you'd say litter picking, friendly team, free tea and coffee. Anything else? Outdoors in a lovely field. Whatever it is, a lovely park. Say whatever it is, whatever words come to spring to mind. You click on inspire me, and it comes up. Join our litter picking friendly team. Love the outdoors. Want to make a real difference to your community? Then join our fantastic team of volunteers, awarding a litter picking session in a lovely park. Blah 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 blah. So ways to try to make your life a little bit easier all the time.
Right.
And there's some other great functions in there. So yeah, definitely one to look forward to. It's quite a live update. Sure. Anyway, we digress away from groups. Is there any other questions? I'm happy to answer questions about anything in the system. But is there anything group related before I stop?
Yes, please.
Yep, sure.
So what we looked at with this session generally was when we're creating new opportunities. But can you kind of turn the restriction to groups on and off? So let's say you want to restrict an opportunity to a group temporarily, and then you might want to do it later. Are you fine to just update the opportunity as and when, and then just save it? And then if you need to restrict it again, you just restrict it again, so you can kind of change it whenever you need to?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You just go in and edit the opportunity. So I'm on an opportunity here. I've just gone into, like you do, go to the opportunity search page, or type in the name here. I'm on the opportunities page here. And if you just go down to restrictions, And then we've got restrict to admin group. I don't want that group now. Now I want that group. Save. That's it. So you can change it whenever you want. Oh, you can see something else they've got in here. You can see the provider groups in here, so you can change. Oh, I didn't know you could do that. You can change it with provider restrictions as well.
So you could kind of remove the group restriction completely, could you? And then re-add it if you wanted to. Fab.
Yeah, just uncheck them and save it. And now it's
Thank you.
That's all. Yeah.
A quick one on that one, then, Stephen. What would happen if somebody was not a member of the group and joined the opportunity, and then the restriction was put in place? They still remain on the opportunity.
They still remain on the opportunity. So the restriction is restricting people from getting onto it. Once they're on it, whether you've manually put them onto it or whether the restriction wasn't there when they got onto it, the system doesn't care. Once you put the restriction in place, it doesn't care who's on the opportunity. It's only looking at new people who are trying to get onto it. That makes sense. So the restriction only restricts people who are trying to get onto it moving forward. It doesn't care about people who are already on it. They're already on it. It can't do anything about them.
That's great. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions?
I might ask one, and this is basically on the specific use that I wanted to use the groups for, because I think you've offered a lot of helpful advice to everyone else. The way that STEMETs work is that we have different opportunities that have themes set aside. So I really wanted to create groups where we have volunteers from different industries. So for example, finance, engineering, tech, and then when we have an opportunity whose theme is engineering, then I can kind of boost it or open it only to the people in the engineering groups. I think based on the sort of geography example that you gave, I understand that the group would be a static group, and every time somebody from an engineering field signed up, I would have to manually assign them the group. But do you think this would be a good way to kind of almost like tag volunteers and keep them segregated by industry?
If you think there's a use for it, so if you want to, there's a couple of things here. So if you want to promote an opportunity to to volunteers who you believe are interested in a particular thing, like engineering, for example, I would suggest that you need to capture off the volunteer whether they're interested in that engineering. There's no real reason for you to have to put them into that engineering group. Why don't you ask them the question? I mean, is there any reason why you don't ask them in registration?
Oh, no. So let me clarify. When we register, we ask them what industry of STEM that they're from. So what industry of science they're from. And then they'll mention like a specific thing. And then we also ask them their job title, their company name. So I will know if a particular person is an engineer. And then I would also know if they're a chemical engineer or if they work in aeronautics or so. But yeah, the example that I gave is, I think in July we have an event and the theme of it is, on International Women in Engineering Day. So I would want anyone in an engineering field. So the way in my mind is that I think we have about hundreds of volunteers on the system. So rather than me running a filter or sending a bulk email of the opportunity, it would be so much easier if I were to just, have all of the engineers in a group, and then that way I can just make it available to them.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily need a group for that. I think it's similar to the other example. So if you're asking them, I think you said at registration you're asking them. Did you say you're asking them what if they're an engineer and what kind of engineer? So there's a field against their profile. There's a question against their profile where you're asking them that, and they're defining it at the point of registration. So you can just go to the volunteer search page. That's like a dynamic group. It's going to change all the time, which is an example of when you wouldn't use groups, because it's changing. It's a dynamic. It changes depending on. And someone could register later on today and say that they're in that engineering group. So suddenly there's another person who should be, who really you want to communicate with, and if you've got an engineering opportunity. So the way to do that is you would go to your search volunteers page, which we'll be looking at here. I have to just zoom this out a little bit so people can see. Go to the volunteer search page, and then you would go down to your custom fields, and you'd have one down here which will be called engineer group or whatever, whatever they're in, whatever you want to, whatever the question is that you've asked them during registration. It will appear down here. Then you can just select it, click on the add button, and then say, show me all volunteers who are interested in engineering. So pretend shop A said engineering, and search, and it's going to show you every volunteer who said that they're interested in engineering when they registered. So that would be the way to do it, rather than put them in a group. Otherwise, if you're relying on groups, you're going to have to, every time someone says they're an engineer, you've got to add them to that group. It's like, why don't we just list the people who have said that they're an engineer when they're registered? Why do I have to also add them to a group?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Any other questions?
I have a question not related to groups, but I can send it via email if that's more
No,
helpful.
you
I
can
don't want to
hold-
waste people's time.
If you hold it for a sec, you wait until the end.
Yeah.
I'll finish the recording, then you can ask me some questions.
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna kind of keep it group related for the recording purposes, but yeah, just hang on at the end, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Anyone else got any other questions related to groups? No. Well, in that case, then I shall stop sharing, and thank you for your time. And like I say, if you want, there's the manual. You've probably seen this when you booked it, when you went to actually book this masterclass. You can download the manual, which goes through everything that I've just spoke about. Then we're showing you screenshots exactly how to do those things. So feel free to look at that, and yeah, and keep an eye out for the next update, which we just spoke about, which is coming in the next couple of weeks. And thank you for your time.